Okay. Good evening, everybody. It's Wednesday night, which is halacha and Tanya. So normally we're learning the medical issues in halacha, but I want to do something different today a little bit, and I want nobody to take this the wrong way, so to speak. I was asked a bunch of times today, what's the story with Thanksgiving? Are you allowed to celebrate Thanksgiving? Are you allowed to eat turkey on Thanksgiving? Because we know in many places they don't, many places they do. So the question is, um, what is the story with Thanksgiving as a Jew? Because it's not technically a Jewish holiday. So is a Jew allowed to celebrate Thanksgiving, and to what extent? Okay, so I want anybody clear that if you're having a turkey tomorrow, you should enjoy it. We're not talking now that you're allowed to, you're not allowed to, just the issues that are involved. There's two general questions over here. Number one, are you allowed to celebrate it as a holiday? And I'll give you an example. Xmas, Christmas, right? Xmas, we're going to call it, is a religious holiday. Therefore, according to halacha, a Jew is not allowed to celebrate that day in any way. But personally, I feel that, let's say, on a holiday, a legal holiday, you have a later minyan, okay, because it's a holiday, people. But on Xmas, you would not be allowed to do that. That's my personal opinion, and I'm pretty firm about it, because that is a religious holiday. New Year's, not necessarily, because New Year's, even though it had to do with the eighth day and with the Yoshka, with the bris and everything, but the bottom line is it's observed as a secular holiday called New Year's, the first day of the year, but it's not a religious holiday. So Xmas is a religious holiday, so Jew would not be allowed to celebrate in any way. So the question is two things. Number one, is a Jew allowed to celebrate it in a way, let's say that you have a later minyan or, things like that? And secondly, to what extent are you allowed to celebrate it? Can you eat turkey? Can you not eat turkey? Should you eat turkey? Should you not eat turkey? So before we go further, the Rebbe spoke a few times about Thanksgiving. There are many siches, you can see them online even. Jem has, short siches of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was very emphatic that the concept of Thanksgiving is a very important thing. And the Rebbe spoke briefly about the history of Thanksgiving, the way the pilgrims came and they ran away from religious persecution. And then they came to America and they made a Thanksgiving to Hashem, which the Rebbe said shows that even people from different religions or whatever are celebrating a day thanking Hashem for all the good that Hashem does for us, which is an unbelievable concept. To the extent that Rebbe said that even a person who says, I don't believe, still celebrates Thanksgiving. They still celebrate Thanksgiving. What are they Thanksgiving to? And the Rebbe said in the Sikha that even a Jew who says, I don't believe, but when push comes to shove, he has a terrible issue going on, who do they turn to? They turn to God, or a supreme being, as the Rebbe called him. So they still believe in that. So the Rebbe said the concept of Thanksgiving is a very important thing. That even the secular world, whether the religious, secular Goyish world or the Jewish, the non-religious people, they still say Thanksgiving and in a very important way to Hashem. So what is the issue about Thanksgiving? Okay. So now that we assume that you can celebrate Thanksgiving, so to speak, as a holiday, because, as the Rebbe said, it's a day thanking to God. Now, if it would be rooted in a religious thing, then it would be forbidden to celebrate it, like we said. But in fact, there are opinions in halacha that say that even a secular holiday that's not religious, or in other words, like this, either they have practices based on religion, or just regular, the halacha calls them foolish customs, that also might be prohibited according to halacha. That's one opinion. It's Taisus's opinion. Other people disagree with that concept. And they say that as long as it's not rooted in a religious holiday, like we said, Xmas, or perhaps Halloween for that matter, is a religious holiday. It is rooted in a religious holiday, or things like that. So then they hold that it wouldn't be a religious holiday. And therefore, for instance, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was a very, very great Pesach and halachic authority. He maintained that it's not a problem celebrating Thanksgiving. I'm talking about the day, not with the customs of Thanksgiving. So he says that it's not called a holiday. It's not called a Goyish holiday. It's a secular holiday, and there's no problem with the celebrating and the day that they instituted that they should celebrate Thanksgiving. But he does say, Rav Moshe Feinstein, that you shouldn't make like that it's a mitzvah that you must eat turkey. He says, you eat turkey, you eat turkey. I mean, what's the difference eating chicken, turkey, meat, or whatever, or vegan? But he says, Rav Moshe Feinstein maintains that to make it, so to speak, that it's a mitzvah, that you must celebrate it with turkey. And he says, that's not a great idea. That's not a great idea for people to do. Other people, like for instance, Rabbi Yosef Shusterman, is known as Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik. He maintained, and others maintained, that it's not a problem eating turkey at all. It's not a problem eating turkey on Thanksgiving. It's not a problem at all. Even if you're doing it as a religious thing, it's not a religious obligation. So you're doing it because this is the custom of what people do. So he held there's absolutely no problem with eating turkey. And by the way, I mentioned this in shul the other day. It's we're lucky that the food of Thanksgiving became a turkey. God forbid they could have made it a pig. You know, that everybody, instead of turkey and cranberry sauce, that have pig and cranberry sauce. And God forbid many more Jews would be eating pig on Thanksgiving. At least turkey is a kosher animal. By the way, it's another interesting point while we're on this matter. All the descendants of the Shalah, the holy Shalah, his last name was Rabbi Horowitz, was before the Alter Rebbe's time. He told that his descendants should not eat turkey. Period. So none of the descendants of the Shalah, a lot of people that have names Horowitz or something like that, they will not eat turkey ever. Just never eat turkey. Because the din is like this. Animals, the kosher sign of animals is choose it cut and have split hooves. The kosher sign of fish is fins and scales. Birds, the Torah doesn't give signs to know what is a kosher bird and what is not a kosher bird. The Torah never says it. The Torah says these birds you can eat and these birds you shouldn't eat. So therefore, the Gemara says the expression, birds are eaten with Kabbalah, meaning it's tradition. Certain birds are traditionally edible, kosher, so we eat them. Birds that were not traditionally eaten, we don't eat them. And even in halacha, going back longer time ago, there was a discussion in halacha if turkey, which is called haidu, if a turkey is traditionally a kosher bird or not. So the halacha is that it is. But the descendants of the Shalom don't eat turkey anytime, any place. They won't eat turkey roll in Delhi. They won't eat turkey, whatever. They just don't eat because that's the Kabbalah, the tradition they had from the Shalom. They don't eat turkey. Halachically, everybody else, if you're not a descendant of the Shalom, you eat turkey. It's not a problem at all. So the question now, there's some people that take an opposite extreme. That the whole holiday, the holiday is a Goyish holiday. It's not allowed to be celebrated. You're not allowed to eat turkey. You're not allowed to eat cranberry sauce. That is a much, some of the Rabbi Menashe Klein, Rabbi Yitzchok Hutner, by the way, also maintained that. But Rabbi David Cohen maintained that it's all a religious holiday. And according to them, you wouldn't be allowed to celebrate it, and you wouldn't be allowed to eat the festive meal of Thanksgiving. So the bottom line is, most people, I mean, not they, as they call it, the difference between the Madics, meaning the modern Orthodox, and the yeshiva world. Generally speaking, in the yeshiva world, people don't celebrate Thanksgiving as a holiday that they'll eat turkey. I mean, many of them do. I'm just saying no, because there's a lot of extremely reliable opinions that say it's not. In other words, according to most people, just talk about the day. The day it could be celebrated, as you can have a later minyan, you can have different things going on because it's a legal holiday, just like you would on July 4th or Memorial Day or anything like that. It's not a religious day. It's a holiday, a secular holiday, which was instituted by the government. So that basically almost everybody agrees it's not an issue. The last fanatic opinion says no. According to them, you shouldn't be making a later minyan. You shouldn't do it. But again, that's universally accepted that you do celebrate you could celebrate it as a holiday. Again, whether you eat turkey or if somebody is worshiping it, making it, it's a must, a mitzvah, must eat turkey and cranberry sauce. If not, who knows what's going to happen to me? That the Moshe Feinstein also says should not be practiced like that. But if somebody eats turkey because that's what they're eating, there's no problem with it. And then Rabbi Yosef, they say Rabbi J.B. Soloveitchik, he said he used to eat turkey with his family on Thanksgiving. So that's just to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving and the various different opinions. There's much more that the person could talk about, but we'll leave it at that. Coming back to medical halacha. So now what I want to discuss today is, I don't think we discussed it yet. We discussed about Bikur Chaylim. We discussed about taking medications, whether they're kosher or not. That we discussed. I want to discuss Shabbos as far as desecrating Shabbos. For what am I allowed to desecrate Shabbos for medical conditions, and what am I not allowed to desecrate Shabbos for? So there's no question, if it's a life-endangering situation, you have to desecrate Shabbos. Not only are you allowed to desecrate Shabbos, you have to desecrate Shabbos. And in fact, the Gemara says, and Shulchan Aruch says, the expression mitzvah b'gadol. What does that mean? Let's say, God forbid, somebody's in a shul and they get a heart attack. It's a mitzvah that the greatest person in the shul should be the first one to make the phone call, to show how important a Jewish life is, that you don't desecrate Shabbos. That you have to desecrate Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to desecrate Shabbos, even for a little reason. So that's if it's a life-endangering situation. Now, there's an interesting story with a broken hand or a broken foot. And it's interesting. In the Mishnah, in the Gemara Shabbos, it says, for a broken hand or foot, you don't desecrate Shabbos. The Gemara and the later codifiers all disagree with that. The Gemara disagrees with that. And the halacha is, for a broken hand, broken foot, whatever it may be, you desecrate Shabbos. That means you're allowed to go in a car, you're allowed to call Hatzalah, you're allowed to call an ambulance. Why? Because if it's not said correctly, it could eventually lead to something that would endanger really the rest of the body. So even if it's a doubt of a doubt of a doubt about the health of a person, I'll give you an example. The Gemara says, what happened? God forbid a wall caved in, or an avalanche caved in on a bunch of people. It's a mitzvah to desecrate Shabbos, even if it's a doubt if somebody would be alive. So let's say there's 10 people that got, the avalanche fell on them. and you open up, you see one person died already. The din is you still desecrate Shabbos to make sure maybe the other 9 are still alive. Even in a doubt of a doubt of a doubt, no matter how many doubts there are, halacha says you have to desecrate Shabbos. It's a mitzvah to desecrate Shabbos. So bottom line, let's say for a broken foot, broken hand, it's a mitzvah to you have to desecrate Shabbos. What other examples? Let's say a woman, let's speak in a positive way, a woman is having a baby. So it's a life endangering situation according to halacha. So she has to go, you're allowed to desecrate Shabbos to go to the hospital. Now let me explain this din, which applies here. It applies in general cases of Shabbos. If I need to desecrate Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to desecrate Shabbos. But if I could do it by desecrating a rabbinic prohibition versus a biblical prohibition without any hindrance to the life endangerment of the person, then I have to do a rabbinic prohibition instead of a biblical prohibition. Like, for example, let's speak good things. A wife is having a baby. Okay, so then she has to go to the hospital to have a baby. Now, the husband could drive her, or you can call an Uber or a taxi. And again, not that, God forbid, it will take 5 hours for the Uber, depending where you live. A lot of times I get calls that they live in a place where there's no Ubers or taxis, So then there's no question the husband takes the wife to the hospital. But if possible, to lessen the desecration of Shabbos without any jeopardizing the health of the patient, if you can take an Uber or a taxi, which the majority are Goyim, non-Jewish drivers, so then it's not a problem. Even though you're going to be using your phone to call the Uber or the taxi, that's not a problem. Why? Because compared to the desecration of Shabbos that you do by driving yourself, it's very, very minimal. Meaning as follows. I think we mentioned this briefly about when talking, emphasizing these dinner more now. When you drive a car, okay, you're creating sparks. Even if it's electric car, it's still creating electricity. So they say if you have a 8-cylinder car, it's 8,000 sparks, 6-cylinder car, 6,000 sparks, 4-cylinder, 4,000 sparks. You're creating a lot of sparks. Not only that, when you brake, the brake lights go on. You're turning on lights. You take your foot off the brake lights go off. So again, that's a desecration of Shabbos, technically. Plus all the spark plugs and all the sparks and everything that's going on. So if you're going with a taxi or an Uber, so then you're not driving. A non-Jew is driving. That's only rabbinically forbidden for a non-Jew to do things for you. So then, as long as it's not going to jeopardize and hinder the medical care of the patient, it should be done with a non-Jew, if possible. If not, they can drive themselves without any question. The only issue is when they get to the hospital, okay, because now turning off the motor is not part of the saving the life of the patient, because that's just not to run out of gas. So then they write, if possible, you should have a non-Jew turning off the motor. Because at least then a non-Jew is doing it, because for a sick person, not even deathly ill, even a Jew has to desecrate Shabbos. If a person is sick, I don't mean sick, they blew their nose once. A person is sick, okay, they have the flu, they have whatever it is. Halachically, a non-Jew is allowed to do work for you on Shabbos. Because telling a non-Jew to do work for you on Shabbos is rabbinically forbidden. It's not biblical, it's rabbinically forbidden. In this case, for an ill person, the rabbis, the Chachamim said, the death law doesn't apply. They were lenient that you can have a non-Jew do things for you on Shabbos. The same rabbis that said you can't are saying when a person is ill, not deathly ill, but again, something, not just the headache, but you're ill, so you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do it. Therefore, for instance, let me go through another issue. What happens if you're taking a taxi or an Uber to the hospital? And this could be not only a wife, it could be a kid. There's something called Murphy's Law that Friday afternoon, somehow kids end up in an emergency room. And now you have to come back on Shabbos. We'll get to that in a second. So in a case where you're going to the hospital, let's say, so you're taking an Uber. Is the husband, let's say, allowed to go in the car together with the patient? Or can a doula go in the car with the patient? So the din is, if the patient wants them to come along, which I hope they do, not you have to go for marriage counseling, but if the wife wants the husband to come along in the car because she'll just feel more secure or whatever, then the husband is allowed to go in the car with her. If you need a doula, you can take the doula in the car with you. It goes even more. What happens? You have a bunch of kids. The husband and wife are going to the hospital. The kids need to be dropped off by a parent or whatever it is, or a babysitter. They can also go in the car on the way to the hospital. Why? Because the fact that the kids are taken care of causes the mother peace of mind, which in medical issues, peace of mind is part of the healing process. So therefore, a case where you have to drop off kids, ideally it should be done on the way to the hospital or whatever it may be. There's a different question. If somebody has to drive to your house to take care of the kids, if it's a non-Jew, it's not an issue. A Jew might be an issue. You need to ask a shayla. Okay, but again, the husband can go in the car together with the woman. If, God forbid, a kid is sick, a parent is sick, whatever. But you can't make a convention. You can have all the mothers-in-law and all the cousins and aunts and uncles and the dogs and the cats and everybody else coming along in the car. The immediate people that she needs, the husband or the doula. If a woman, let's say, is having a baby and she really wants her mother in the hospital, she really wants it, then the mother could go also. Ideally, if the doula has to go to the hospital from a different place or another relative has to go, they should also go with non-Jews because it lessens the prohibition without jeopardizing the healing of the patient. Now I'll give you another example. You come into the hospital, okay? Sometimes you have to sign papers. Now again, is a woman going, generally speaking, if somebody's in a hospital, it's called a life-endangering situation. You don't go to the hospital because you want a vacation from your family. You know what I mean? It's usually considered a life-endangering situation when a person is in a hospital. But you have to sign papers. And otherwise, they're not going to do procedures. So again, the din is as follows. You try to minimize it. Meaning, let's say you're a right-handed person. So if you write 2 letters with your right hand, that's biblically forbidden. But if you write it with your left hand, because that's not the normal way of doing writing for you, so then it's only rabbinically forbidden. So if you could sign the paper with your left hand instead of your right hand, that's the lesser of the evils, and you're not jeopardizing the care of the patient. So then you should sign the papers with your left hand. If you're a left-handed person, you should sign the papers with your right hand. If you're ambidextrous, you sign it with either hand that you want. But again, if you have to sign the papers, again, minimizing it is not an issue. Now, let's say the patient is coming into the hospital and they're taking the patient up in an elevator. Now, technically, the husband could go up in the stairs. But again, if the wife wants the husband to be with her, or the doula, whatever it is, they're allowed to go in the elevator together with the patient. because they're not doing anything. They're just indirectly adding more weight to the elevator. So therefore, they're not really doing something that bad that's biblically forbidden. And for the sick person, in these cases, it would be allowed. Now, let's say while a person is in a hospital, again, having a baby, okay? Anything that they need, anything, they can ask the nurse to do for them. Whatever they want. They want a plate of ice cream, they can ask the nurse, whatever they want, kosher. They can have whatever they want. They can ask the nurse to do whatever they want. But sometimes there's no nurse around. And there's nobody in your room to call the nurse. So normally you have the call button. You call, press the button to call the nurse. If possible, the person should press the call button differently than always, because then it's a shinui. If you're not doing it the normal way of doing it, it's only rabbinically forbidden versus biblically forbidden. So then it would be preferable to press it with your elbow or with your, not with your regular fingers. Just to do it a little bit different, minimizes the desecration of Shabbos. And if you can't, by the way, if you need the nurse, and the only way is by pressing the button normally, it doesn't work any other way, you're allowed to press the button normally and to get the nurse. Why? Because the sick person in the hospital, number one, generally speaking, is considered a life-endangering situation. If not, you wouldn't be in the hospital. And secondly, even if not, a non-Jew is allowed to do things for a patient on Shabbos, no matter what it is, even biblical things. A non-Jew can do things for you on Shabbos. Now, we're going to continue this now, but a few more things. What happens if they did discharged on Shabbos? Okay, I'll tell you where it's very practical also. Friday afternoon, somebody ends up in an emergency room. Okay, a little kid did something, they need stitches, or whatever it is, or an adult, it doesn't matter. They stay, it takes a few hours, okay, and they're going to go home 10 o'clock at night, it's already Shabbos. And the home is too far to walk, and especially if a patient's sick, they're not able to walk. So in that case, the patient can go back again with the non-Jew. Because for them, to be at home is more soothing and relaxing for the patient instead of sleeping in a hospital, in a couch somewhere. So they're allowed to go back by car. Now the question though is, can the husband go back? Because now it's not life endangering anymore. So again, if it's possible, let's say for the husband to walk home or one of the parents to walk home, that's fine. It's better. If not, according to many opinions, especially if the patient wants them, they can go back in the car. But when you go in a car, there's another thing I want to mention. When you're going in a car, whether it's to the hospital, from the hospital, whatever it is, again, we try to minimize the desecration of Shabbos, especially when you don't jeopardize the health. Therefore, normally when you open a car door, the light goes on. You're going to close the car door, the light goes off. So if the non-Jew could open the car door for you and then close the car door for you, you're minimizing in desecration of Shabbos. Then when they get to the hospital, again, they open the door for you and then they close the door. If you have packages to carry in, ideally the best thing would be for the non-Jew to carry it to the car, from the car into the hospital. Once you're in the hospital, you're allowed to carry anywhere in the hospital. There's no problem at all. You're allowed to carry anywhere in the hospital. Okay, so we're going to stop it. We're going to go to Tanya Mitzvah Shem next week. We'll continue about Shabbos medications. How do you light Shabbos candles in the hospital? But that Mitzvah Shem will be continued next week. So now we're going to go to Tanya.